Over the past 10 years in the United States, motorcycle riding and popularity has basically stayed the same, which is kind of sad, right? In 2010, about 8 million motorcycles were registered in the United States, and in 2018, about 8.3 million. So it hasn't really gone up. Motorcycling hasn't really become more popular since 2010. 2020 brought in a bit of a surge, but that's beside the point for what we're talking about now. Motorcycle safety has increased both technologically and in terms of actual rider use. More riders are wearing helmets than ever before in the United States. More riders are wearing gear, and the helmets and gear that are available are safer than ever. You can get yourself a great motorcycle jacket with armor and everything for a few $100 that would rival almost anything that was available 10 or 15 years ago. But for some reason, motorcycle fatalities are not going down here in the United States. In fact, they're staying the same, sort of in line with motorcycle use. About 5,000 riders die every single year in the United States. In 2019, about 60% of those fatalities came from people who are riding sport and super sport bikes. This will all matter as I make my case a bit later. Now, the other part of my case is that you've heard the statistic, you're significantly more likely to crash in the first year of riding, and actually especially the first 30 days of riding. Like, you're more likely to crash in the first 30 days than you are in the next 2 years. Again though, why are the number of fatalities staying the same? There's more helmet laws in the United States, like helmet laws are a bit stricter. There are less people drinking and riding. So what is it that's happening? Well, I have a theory that can account for this, at least in part, and yeah, here it is. So in the United States, 8.3 million registered motorcycles, we've got that, and then around 5,000 deaths per year. In the UK, we have 1.2 million registered motorcycles and around 400 deaths per year. Now, if you compare these two and you pretend that the UK has the same amount of registered motorcycles as the US, you would expect a fatality rate of around 2,700, so roughly half of the fatalities that we have here in the US per motorcycle. In 2019 in Australia, there were around 870,000 registered motorcycles, and there's 2.4 fatalities per 10,000 registered motorcycles, so roughly 200 motorcycle deaths. So for every 10,000 registered motorcycles, the UK has about 3.3 deaths, Australia has around 2.4 deaths, and the US has around 6 deaths per 10,000 registered motorcycles. Since 2010, Australia has gone down from 3.4 to 2.4, a huge decrease in fatality rates as Australia has become more strict about helmet laws, and something else we're going to talk about in a minute. The US is nowhere near the UK and Australia. Now, the comparisons are somewhat unfair for my purposes, but I'm going to use them anyways, because I do believe there's another factor besides just helmets in the fact that the UK and Australia have helmet laws, whereas we don't. We do have some helmet laws, it's varied by state, but in those countries, it's like the entire country just has strict helmet laws. But again, why is the fatality rate not going down here as things become better, or at least should be becoming better in terms of safety? All of the factors are there to lower our fatality rates. So what is the one thing, the one safety risk that's increasing in the United States that places like the UK and Australia just don't have to deal with? Well, I believe that it has to do with new rider restrictions. See, here in the United States, we don't have restrictions on newer riders. In the UK and Australia, newly licensed riders must ride on a restricted bike for a certain period of time before they can jump up to the full license and get a fully powered bike, at least legally. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't ride fun bikes, they just can't ride the same bikes that new riders here can ride. In Australia, they call them LAM bikes, or a learner-approved motorcycle. This is a bike that must have an engine capacity of less than or equal to 600 cc's, and it must have a power to weight ratio of 150 kilowatts per ton or less. So in the case of the 660 Trident, that bike is restricted down as a LAM bike in Australia to around 52 horsepower instead of 80 horsepower. Now in the UK, it's even more strict, with learner bikes needing to be 125 cc's or less. But here in the US, we're different. A 16-year-old can go get their motorcycle license without having to ever take a safety course. They can literally just borrow a friend's bike, practice the test for a bit and go pass, and then go hop on any 1000cc rocket ship motorcycle. I know that this is a dark picture, but it's a reality for our country every single year. Young, new riders are dying every single year riding bikes that they shouldn't be on. And I think about this a lot as my son obsessively sits on my bike and on our pocket rocket any chance he gets. And trust me, he wants to go fast. But what does this have to do with the fact that though safety is getting better and more accessible and more used, fatality rates are staying the same? Here's that one factor that really matters. It's the bikes themselves. Sport and super sport bikes are becoming faster, lighter, more powerful, and more accessible, and this factor just does not apply to the UK and to Australia and to other countries that have restrictions for newer riders, because those riders who are at the greatest risk of crashing and dying, that is new riders, cannot get their hands legally on a bike like that. A young new rider in Australia can't just jump on an 1100cc Ducati or even like a 660cc Aprilia. Sure, they could do it illegally, but that happens everywhere, so that's not really a factor. You can literally pick up a 180 horsepower used Gixxer for so little, and the amount of power available is truly astonishing. One blip of the throttle, one mistake in a corner, and you're gonna lose control of that bike, even if you're an experienced rider. But it's not just, the 200 horsepower death machines. No, it's the fact that a 600cc sport bike today is so much faster than a 600cc sport bike from 2010. It's not just the massive leader bikes, everything is fast today. The riders who are at most risk in our country are often the ones looking to ride these bikes, and that is really a culture that I think needs to change. There's nothing wrong with these bikes. I don't believe it should be illegal to ride them or anything like that. I just don't see why we don't have a similar setup to restrict new and younger riders to smaller capacity, lower powered bikes. I'm open to arguments, but I just don't see how it makes sense. It takes years to really be ready for something like a Gixxer 1000 or even a 100 horsepower sport bike, even the Triumph Trident with like 80 horsepower. That's a big, fast bike for new riders. And everybody does talk about how these are, not really good beginner bikes. Everybody tries to advise new riders to stay away from bikes like that. But the videos and the articles and stuff saying that are really not getting at the real problem, in my opinion. Of course, newer, younger riders want to ride bikes like that because that's what everybody on social media and on YouTube rides. This is what the most experienced riders are doing. These are what the coolest riders are doing. They're riding the fastest, biggest bikes, and they're doing insane stuff on them. I do love that companies like Aprilia are making like small 125cc sport bikes that are geared more towards newer riders, but here in the US, I really don't think it's gonna matter. I don't think it's gonna change unless the laws change. So what do you guys think? What do you think are the other factors, or is this a factor in the fact that United States motorcycle fatality rates are really not changing even though things are getting safer? Do you guys think that I'm right, that it's tied to the increase in motorcycle speed and power without regulations, or do you think that it's something else? Let us know down below. This kind of thing is always a discussion, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, especially with this topic, ride safe.